reduces you to the same fallacy.
We're not actually to prove any transcendental claim. You're making another claim that other worldviews reduce to absurdity, and that's what we're asking you to present an argument for.
That's the same fallacy. I'll think about it like this. When you ask for, there's a difference between a soft reducto and what's known as a logical reducto. Every true logical reducto can be proven through some form of methodology. I can give you many examples. Here's a reductant ad absurdum. Rocks have weight, therefore if rocks didn't have, rocks have weight, otherwise they would see them floating in the air. This is one on the Wikipedia page. Okay, we can verify methodologically that rocks have weight. So at least one of these premises, and think about this, Floyd, and this is true, Ozzy's already admitted, and every single case of reductio ad absurdum that is actually a logical reducto has to be proven at least one premise methodologically. Guess what? None of my premises can be proven methodologically. Therefore, you beg the question. So it is literally the exact same thing.
No. You need to do an internal critique of my worldview to show that it's absurd. See, you're applying your standard to my worldview. That's an external critique. Thus, you're begging the question.
No, that's
the
not
problem.
true. That's not true. I actually admit my presuppositions do beg the question.
You can't justify any presuppositions without begging the question, and that's a given. And I'm not asking you to validate or defend any of your presuppositions. No, I'm not.
You said I need to logically
show the impossibility of the contrary,
right,
and you already agreed that is not a presupposition.
But listen, that implies that I have to. You will not accept what I've already provided, which is known as a soft reducto. Remember that example I gave you? That's known as a soft reducto. It's logically formed, but it's not logically sound because it can't be proven through some form of methodology, right? So what you're really asking me to do is present.
What can't be shown? Your rock example?
No, it's the example. Remember when I said if the Christian God is the necessary precondition for all existence, intelligibility, and life, it is logically inconsistent for you to remain agnostic on this case, right? Due to the impossibility of the contrary. So what I said is,
that's where you're confused right there.
Think about the other example I gave you. If I'm currently speaking to you right now, I am dead while I'm currently speaking to you right now. That's a reductio ad absurdum because I cannot both be dead right now and speaking with you. In the same way that if God doesn't exist, we could not be here right now. But the problem is that's a true soft reducto. If that is in fact true.
But that's within your worldview, though.
No. It's what's known as a soft reducto. It is logically formed, but the thing is, it's not provable through methodology, right? So I can't prove that to you methodologically, but that's what you're asking me to do. You're asking me for what's known. I provided you a soft reducto, but you're saying no. You need to provide to me a logical reducto.
Well, you're not comparing worldviews. That's the problem. You're applying the presuppositions of your worldview to other worldviews. You're the one begging the question here, not me.
No. What I'm trying to say, Floyd, is we are both begging the question, and I can prove this.
This. Again, I'm not asking you to prove any presupposition within your worldview.
You're asking for if you ask for a logical reducto. You're asking for a logical reducto, Floyd.
Within other worldviews. I'm not asking you to prove your worldview at all.
You are by asking.
No, I'm not. Yes. I'm not even touching your worldview.
When you ask me for a logical reducto, you force me
within other worldviews, not within your worldview. This has nothing to do with your worldview.
Yeah, but I just told you there's no way possible to form a logical reducto from a transcendental claim because none of my premises can be verified methodologically.
But your impossibility of the contrary is not a transcendental claim, so that's irrelevant.
No, in the way that I'm using it, it's a transcendental claim. Like I told you, not all arguments of impossibility of the contrary are transcendental claims.
So basically what you're saying is your transcendental claim is your religion is correct. That's what you're reducing your transcendental claim down to. Your religion is correct. Therefore, all other religions are false. Well, well, so that boils down to, any worldview could say my worldview is true and all other worldviews are
No,
false.
only transcendental worldviews, and I've already told that to Sokka before you came in here. I said
All
this argument.
presuppositions are transcendental.
No, not all. Not in the way that I'm claiming transcendentality. I'm claiming that the only form of this argument only works if you can claim that your God or your deity is the logical precondition, necessary precondition for existence. For example, this argument logically fits a Muslim. This logically fits any other monotheist that have a creation thing. But that doesn't mean that you can still reject it based on a form of methodology without begging the question because of that. So. Which you've done.
Again, what you're saying is, since your God is the logical precondition of everything, of me sitting here, of the Earth existing, it's impossible for the Earth to exist otherwise.
Absolutely, that's absolutely what I'm saying.
So
you're saying, well, that might be true, Shamos. You say this is what Floyd says as agnostic. Well, that might be true, but in order for that to be true, I need what's known as a logical reductio. And guess what, Floyd?
You need to show all other possibilities are false. Like you need to show that the Earth can't form through the laws of gravity, for example. No, it's asking you to show that my worldview is impossible, which you have not done.
Floyd, it cannot be done. That means you know it cannot be done from the outset. You are begging the question. I've just caught you.
No, I'm not.
Oh my God.
You're begging the question because you want to evaluate my worldview with your presuppositions. You're the one begging the question.
No, Floyd, we're both begging the question.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you to look at my worldview, take my presuppositions, take them for granted, and then show they're absurd.
Floyd,
which you haven't done, and which Ozzy has been asking you to do over and over again.
He admitted in chat that was fallacious, and he's going to get in here and say, I cannot ask you for a logical reductio. I cannot do that without begging the question. I'm telling you, this is certain. If you ask,
I think you're very confused.
Okay, think about this.
Very confused.
If you're asking me for a logical reductio, and you know from the outset that I cannot provide this to you, and I've admitted this, you obviously know this. That's why you keep asking.
Then you failed.
No.
The transcendental argument has failed.
No transcendental claims can be evaluated in this method. So you beg the question.
But you said we keep on going around in circles.
Okay. It's believe me, this is right here. What you're seeing right now, this is
no. What you're doing is
in the middle of the fallacy.
No. What you're doing is you're saying my transcendental claim is that my religion is true.
Yes.
I mean, are you serious? I mean, that's a joke.
I'm saying that all Christians.
Okay, my transcendental claim is my worldview is true. In fact, I'll reduce my presuppositions down to one. Everything I say is correct.
This is the funny part about it. You think
so if you contradict me, you're wrong.
I'm not trying to prove truth. I'm not trying to prove the truth of my claim. I'm trying to prove the fallaciousness of you evaluating my claim. This has nothing to do. I could be absolutely wrong.
I'm not evaluating your claim at all.
Okay, Floyd.
I'm not evaluating your claim at all. Again, I'm not even touching your transcendental claims. I'm asking you to give a reductio ad absurdum to my worldview.
Right, logical reducto, which is begging the question, dude. Which I've already said, and which Ozzy's already admitted. Okay. Well,
no.
I'm serious, man. This is a very serious thing that I'm presenting to you because it's going to literally shatter your whole entire worldview by the time this conversation's over.
No, I think it's laughable.
Okay, well, we will see. But here's the thing.
I think you're very confused.
No, I can tell you're in the hot seat right now because I'm presenting stuff to you that you really haven't thought about. You're ad hocing stuff.
No,
you're ad hocing stuff right now. You know you are. It's cool. No,
I'm more than familiar with this. I've encountered this stuff years before Sci-10 Grugenkate ever came on board.
This isn't Sci-10 stuff. This is ontological. This isn't epistemological precept. This is ontological precept.
What you're doing is you're declaring the impossibility of the contrary part of your worldview.
I could be wrong, and you would still be in a fallacy right now, Floyd. That's the beauty of it. The truth claim has no value on this. I could be absolutely wrong in this presupposition, but you are still caught in a fallacy. So the truth claim could still be the value.
What is that fallacy?
You're begging the question.
How am I begging the question?
Okay, if you ask me for a logical, and I'm going to say it for the 10th time, if you ask me for a logical reductio, which you have done,
of my worldview, not your worldview, of my worldview. That's the difference.
No, Floyd, you're ad hocing this, man. You
need to show the absurdity of my worldview.
That's asking for a logical reductio, man.
Yes, within my worldview.
That begs the question.
What am I begging?
You know for a fact no transcendental claim can reduce to a logical reductio.
What is the transcendental claim I'm making?
I'm making the transcendental claim, and you are trying to evaluate.
But that transcendental claim is in your worldview, not my worldview.
It's a transcendental claim regardless
of your worldview.
No, it's a transcendental claim.
Oh man, you're very confused. Do you know the difference between an internal and an external critique?
Yes, I do, Floyd, and I know.
Well, say what they are then. I want to hear.
An external critique is if I use my presuppositions to judge your presuppositions.
Right, and that's exactly what you're protesting.
And so I know what's going on. And an internal critique is me trying to presuppose your presuppositions and then evaluate your methodology from those.
Right, and then to show it's impossible, you have to take those presuppositions.
Right.
And do a reductio ad absurdum.
Yeah, which I provided you a soft reductio, and you're asking.
Okay, let's hear that. Let's hear that.
Okay, here's the soft reductio for the 3rd time. Premise 1, all existence is contingent on the Christian God due to the impossibility of the contrary.
That's not a presupposition of my worldview. That's not part of my worldview.
Floyd, you're ad hocing this because it doesn't matter. I'm saying that when someone... Let me explain to you why.
That's not an internal critique. You're not doing an internal critique.
Let me explain to you why.
No, if you invoke your God, there is no Christian God in my worldview. Okay. You're begging the question. That's why I just proved that you begged the question.
When I present to you a transcendental truth claim...
But that truth claim is not in my worldview, so therefore you're not doing an internal critique.
I could produce to you any truth claim. And most truth claims can be evaluated through methodological naturalism.
Are you going to do an internal critique or not? Are you going to do an internal critique or not?
It's not required. That's an ad hoc argument. It's not even logically sound. And I'm sure... Yeah, I'm saying that. You
just contradicted yourself.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Okay. Keep asking me for logical reductios, and then hopefully when Ozzy gets here, he'll straighten this all out.
I can't. I wish Ozzy was here right now.
Because Ozzy admitted in the side chat that it is impossible to get to a logical reductio from a transcendental claim. It's impossible because one of the premises of all logical reductios, which are reductios that are sound, have one premise that is evaluated through methodological naturalism. Here, I'm going to show you about 10 examples. Here we go. These are from the Wikipedia page. First one, I've already showed you the rocks have weight one that can be verified methodologically. Second one, society must have laws, otherwise there would be chaos. Society having laws can be verified methodologically. Here's the third one, and this one's an abstract. This is really going to bug you. There is no smallest positive rational number, because if there were, it would be divided by 2 to get to a smaller one. Okay?
Right.
That right there can be evaluated through methodology of mathematics, which shows that actually there is a smaller number. So you can read the definition on that one. There is a smaller number, and it's proven mathematically. So
why is this a problem? Because again, that's all within their paradigm.
No, listen, this is a problem.
All reductio ad absurdums are begging the question?
No, listen. All reductio ad absurdums that are logical, not just a soft reductio, a logical reductio, have at least one premise that can be verified methodologically. Guess what, Floyd? None of my premises can be verified methodologically. None, not a single one.
But you still don't get it. You still don't get it. The methodology is being used within the worldview.
I'm presenting to you.
You're still doing. You're crossing worldviews. You're doing an external critique. You don't even realize it.
I'm putting.
I don't know how many
you-
times I can explain this to you. You just don't get it. I'm sorry.
No, you're Floyd. Listen, I'm putting forth to you a truth claim, and then what I'm poking holes at is how you are asking me to evaluate this claim.
I'm not asking you to evaluate
Yes,
any
you
of your
said you're
truth
asking me
claims
to provide you a logical reductio for the
within
claim.
my worldview, within my claims, not your claims, within
It doesn't
my
matter.
claims.
That doesn't change
It
anything.
absolutely does matter if you're going to do an internal critique.
Okay.
You just don't get it. I
No,
don't know how to explain this to you any further.
no. Trust me on this. You're in some deep water here. Yeah. Okay. When Ozzy shows up, he's going to say, Floyd, you really cannot ask him for a logical reductio, because the moment you do, you beg the question, and then you're going to go.
Ozzy
arguing.
Ozzy never asked you for a reductio ad absurdum.
He did, and he didn't.
He asked the very last thing he said to you in whatever anyway.
He asked me for the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, he's actually messaging right now.
Let him in.
The thing he asked you this morning was a reductio ad absurdum, and he actually gave you the syllogism for it.
Right, and one of those premises can be verified methodologically.
Yes, within the worldview.
No, it has nothing to do with
okay, so now you disagree with Ozzy, where you're saying Ozzy agreed with you and disagreed
with me. Wait till he shows up here. I think you're going to be very interested to see how this takes place.
Oh, I can't wait.
If you think I just sat around and smoked a little weed and figured out some little dumb shit, and I come in here to postulate something that I haven't fully thought out, you are very wrong, sir.
No, I just think you're very confused.
Okay, all right. I hear that.
I think you still know the difference between internal and external critique.
Oh, I defined them both for you earlier, and you accepted
and then you didn't follow that because you asserted one of your presuppositions to evaluate my worldview. You're the one begging the question, dude.
I'm just posting.
I don't know what more I can say.
I'm posting to you a truth claim, and you have to evaluate it through your methodology. But the methodology you're using to evaluate it is fallacious. You have to do that to any truth claim, Floyd. I could say, Floyd,
what am I evaluating? What exactly am I evaluating?
You have to evaluate any truth claim someone puts before you.
And what truth claim are you putting in front of me?
I've already told you the fact that the Christian God is a necessary precondition for all existence. This is a truth claim I presented to you. Within your worldview, you have to evaluate this, and you have evaluated this.
No. I don't need to evaluate that at all.
Okay. If you think that gets you out...
I think that's a transcendental claim within your worldview.
All right. Okay.
How's that relevant to showing that my worldview is impossible?
I've been very generous, and I'm going to go ahead and throw out my Joker card. I wanted to throw it out when Ozzy got here, but I'm going to throw it out now. Guess what, Floyd? You cannot provide to me any example of a logical reductio that one of its premises are not affirmed methodologically. You can't. Guess what? There's none. There's none.
I was trying to yell at you. Ozzy will be here in just a second.
There's not a single one, Floyd. You want to know why? Because it's impossible. Otherwise, it would be a soft reductio. So that means that what I'm saying is so absolutely logically consistent that there has never been an example to the otherwise. Never.
Who put forward that your worldview is, well, those premises that you've given is logically inconsistent? No one has said that.
No, so, it's logically consistent. That's the problem with
right.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think your worldview.
You can't ask for any farther than that. Is what I'm saying. The moment you ask for more than that, you are begging the question, and that's what
and did I ask more than that?
Okay, well then we're done. Then guess what, Floyd?
No.
Okay.
A worldview that's internally consistent is not a mark of veracity.
That's exactly where I'm trying to get you from. You have to evaluate my truth claim out of a form of subjectivity, and you have to guise your subjectivity from your methodology. That's what you just said. Okay, I'm not going.
No, that would be an external critique.
I just reduced you to saying you cannot go further than that without being fallacious, and now you're saying that you want to go further than that.
No.
Okay,
I said you're going too far.
Okay.
I think you're very confused.
I'm more lucid now than I've been in a long time.
I think you're more confused than ever.
Okay.
Because you keep on jumping back and forth between saying that the impossibility of the contrary is not a transcendental claim, and then you say it is a transcendental claim.
Not all claims of the impossibility of the contrary are transcendental. For example,
well, is yours transcendental or not?
My argument from the impossibility of the contrary happens to be a transcendental argument using that premise. Okay.
So it is a transcendental claim.
Yes, I'm positing to you a transcendental claim with one of the stipulations being impossibility to the contrary.
So your transcendental claim is your religion is right and all other religions are wrong.
No, it has nothing to do with the truth claim. I've told you, it only has to do, I could be false and you would still be committing a fallacy. It has nothing to do with
what fallacy am I committing? I still don't.
You're begging the question.
How am I begging the question?
All right, well, wait. You will see. If you haven't, I've explained it very rationally so far. But if you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to wait for Floyd to chime in.
You've been contradicting yourself left and right for the last 15 minutes.
All right.
But let Ozzy. Ozzy could probably explain it better. But again,
so go ahead, Floyd. I thought you were finished. Beg pardon.
Yeah. Well. It seems like Shamos is confused about what it means, what it means to have the impossibility of the contrary.
How about I start this out? I've got this all written down, and then I'm going to levy 2 accusations against both of you for being fallacious, and then we'll see. We'll go from there. How about that? Okay.
Sure.
So okay, and here's the one that I'm going to be levying at Floyd first. Floyd says you need to prove to me with this claim of the impossibility of the contrary that it is actually the contrary is actually impossible. Okay,
yes.
This is asking for a logical reductio. This is not asking for a soft reductio. This is actually asking for a logical reductio. Well, Ozzy is actually doing the same thing. Ozzy said, and I've got him quoted here. He said, "No, you're equivocating between a logical reductio and what's sometimes called a soft reductio." See, when he asked for my reductium ad absurdum, I did give him one, but it was a soft reductio. And he's saying, no, Shamos, I want you to provide to me a logical reductio. Well, this is where the problem comes in. You cannot ever get to a logical reductio from a transcendental claim. For example, every example that you could ever provide of a logical reductio, at least one of the premises can be evaluated methodologically. Here's the problem. My claim, none of the premises can be evaluated methodologically. I'm going to show you a few examples here of logical. These aren't these aren't soft reductios. These are actual logical reductios. I'm going to give you a few examples and show you why every one of these has a premise that can be verified methodologically. First one, rocks have weight, otherwise we would see them floating in air. Rocks having weight can be verified methodologically. Society must have laws, otherwise there would be chaos. Society having laws is verified methodologically. Now here's a really good one. This one, like I said earlier, deals with an abstract concept. There is no smallest positive rational number because if it were, it could be divided by 2 to get a smaller one. This is a reductio ad absurdum using a concept. Well, guess what? This concept can be verified methodologically using mathematics. So guess what? Every single logical reductio of all time, that truly boils down to what's known as a true logical reductio, has to have at least one premise that's verified through methodology. Guess what? None of mine can. So when you ask me to provide you a logical reductio, both of you gentlemen are begging the question. And I'll stop there.
But see, the problem is though, your transcendental claims are within your worldview.
It's an ad hoc argument because it has nothing to do with anything. Because I'm just presenting you a truth claim, and then you have to evaluate my truth claim.
So what you're doing is you're just isolating all your most dubious claims as transcendental, and thus you're saying they cannot be evaluated.
Obviously, Floyd. That's obvious. That's why you're begging the question to ask me to provide a logical reductio.
But no, I'm asking you to do a reductio within my worldview, not yours.
It's irrelevant because I'm...
But you're the one claiming that my worldview is impossible. That needs an argument.
I don't have to prove it from your worldview because I'm presenting to you a truth claim, and you are being fallacious.
No, what you're doing is, the truth claim you're providing is that your religion is right. That's all you're doing.
Basically, yes. The truth claim I'm presenting to you is that the Christian God is the necessary precondition for all of existence due to the impossibility of the contrary.
No,
Listen. My truth claim, the truth value of this could be 0. I could be absolutely wrong, but you would still be being fallacious by trying to evaluate this from a logical reductio.
I'm not evaluating at all. I'm asking
Actually,
you to provide an argument for the impossibility of the contrary, which you've failed to do.
Right. The moment you ask me for a true impossibility of okay, I'm going to say it again. Everything that's ever been proven to be a truly impossibility of the contrary, for example, all oxygen, not O3, but oxygen, consists of 2 oxygen molecules, or atoms. These atoms are the only way that this can come through the law of non-contradiction and definitionally, okay? This right here can be proven methodologically. So if it was different, it would not be an oxygen molecule due to the impossibility of the contrary.
An oxygen molecule is defined as
I'm in an atom, oxygen atom. But what I'm saying is...
Oh no, oxygen molecule is O2, right? That's two oxygen atoms, and that's by definition.
Right. Well, here's what I'm saying is this is the accusation I'm levying at you. There's 2 things in question here: the claims of impossibility of the contrary, and then the other one is...
Is that a transcendental claim, or is that something you evaluated?
I'm just going to finish the sentence and then I'll answer that. There's 2 things in question here. One is what's known as a logical reductio. Every single logical reductio in all of history that's proven to not be a soft reductio, but a logical reductio, has to be at least one premise proven methodologically, or else it would be a soft reductio. In the same way...
That's incorrect. You got this backwards.
Sure.
Yeah, take over, Ozzy, because I've been trying to explain this to him for the last 20 minutes.
Okay. Shamos, first of all, can you just elaborate a little bit on what you mean by to evaluate methodologically? Because I think everything hinges on this, and I think your conception of what a reductio is incorrect. I think you're confusing a logical reductio with what's sometimes called a soft reductio. I think you have them exactly backwards. I think you understand the distinction, but you have the terminology backwards.
No, I actually know exactly what they mean. A soft reductio is an argument that absolutely is logically consistent, but it's the soundness of that reductio is in question, whether or not it is actually true, right? So in forms of an actual logical reductio, it has to be proven.
That's incorrect. That's incorrect.
Okay, then provide to me one example of a logical reductio that cannot be proven through a form of methodology.
Okay, well we do this in geometry. You can look at any geometric proof. You can just look up any geometric proof. But here's why I was asking about evaluate methodologically. Okay. You seem to think that a reductio involves some demonstration of one of the premises contradicting a fact. Okay, that's not what a logical reductio is. A logical reductio, for those who don't know what reductio ad absurdum means, it's just a Latin expression that means to reduce to absurdity. And there are 2 ways that we reduce arguments to absurdity. One way, the soft reductio, is when you establish that something that somebody has said flies in the face or contradicts some other known or accepted fact. Right, something that we know to be true, or something that the person you're arguing with accepts to be true, and consequently you've established that there's something wrong there because they've got a premise or an argument or a belief, some proposition in their belief set that they take to be true that implies that something else that they take to be true is false, right? So they've got a contradiction there. Okay, that's a soft reductio. Okay, but a strict logical reductio is when you are able, on the basis of assuming a proposition, derive a contradiction, not a contradiction between something you believe and something else, some fact that contradicts it. No, it's not a demonstration. It's not a falsification. Okay, you're literally able to derive a proposition and its negation. So here's how a logical reductio works. You assume that there's a true dichotomy between P and not P. Okay, so that is to say, you're saying that P or not P, but not P and not P. So this is simply the principle of the excluded middle and the principle of non-contradiction that you're granting. You're granting that if P is true, not P is false, and if not P is true, then P is false. They can't both be true. You can't have P and not P, right? A true dichotomy, okay? So then you say, okay, well, we're granting that, and then you assume not P. You assume that P, whatever P is false. So in this the present argument, that P would be that the Christian God exists, and not P would be that the Christian God exists not, right? So you assume not P. And then, if you can, by assuming not P, derive a proposition, let's call it Q, and then you can also derive another proposition, not Q, right? The negation of Q, right? If you can derive Q and not Q, you've derived a contradiction. You have derived two propositions, right? You haven't demonstrated that one of them is false, right? You don't know that one of them is false, okay, or that one is true. You just derived both Q and not Q from the proposition not P. And if you can derive a contradiction from any proposition, including not P, then you know that the negation of that proposition has to be true. So if you assume not P is the case for the purpose of the argument, and you're able to derive Q and not Q, you have shown that the premise not P that you assumed for the sake of argument has to be false, and therefore P has to be true. That is what we call proof by contradiction, or you literally derive a contradiction. So if you're able, for instance, to start with some assumption, like not P, doesn't matter what P is, okay, and you're able to arrive at a proposition, you're able to derive a proposition such as that is a chair, and you're also able to derive the proposition that is not a chair, you don't need to check with the world methodologically to verify to see if it's false, because you know that the proposition that is a chair and that is not a chair cannot be true. You don't have to check or verify or falsify, or there's no methodological procedure required. It's a flat contradiction. And so if you can derive a flat contradiction, okay, you have established the impossibility of the contrary. You've established that not P cannot be true, and therefore P would have to be true. That is what we mean by a strict logical. Right now, now ask yourself: if I go around saying that is a chair and that is not a chair, I am an egg and I am not an egg, right? If I go around saying things like that, okay, no one has to check and see. Well, you know, is Ozzy an egg, or is he not an egg? Is that thing a chair or not a chair? No, we don't have to bother with that, because we know that the union of those two propositions is impossible, right? And so any proposition that implied that contradiction has to be false. There's no methodological procedure required.
All you're doing, Ozzy,
yeah,
all you're doing is just citing the law of non-contradiction, which, think about this. Think about this, Ozzy. You're asking me to say, look, you've done a very good example, which I think only is served to really help people that are kind of maybe not know what we're talking about here, but you did a good example of saying what is a true logical reductio. That's right, I agree with you, but here's the problem. I'm saying right now that there is no way for me to provide to you a logical reductio.
I agree.
So you're asking me one begs the question.
Wait, how is that begging the question? I'll tell you why I think that's not begging the question.
I will tell you exactly why that is begging the question.
Let me tell you first why I think it's not, and then you can tell me where I'm wrong and how you escape the difficulty here as I see it. How's that?
Sure.
I don't think it matters which of us goes first, but all right. But I just want to make sure that what you say next addresses what my concern is here. Well, actually, no, you're right. Actually, it makes more sense since you're making the case, you're making the argument. You really should go first. Forgive me. Go ahead.
Okay, this is why you're begging the question. You just admitted, and I appreciate that. You just admitted that you're asking me for a logical reductio, but you know for a fact that I cannot provide it to you. That's begging the question, and I can show you. I will actually go through the logical form if you want to know why that's begging the question. If you have a standard, right? Okay, and this is the standard you're going to evaluate my truth claim from, and then from the outset, you know that my truth claim cannot be evaluated through this methodology, right? Then you know very well that asking me to do so already assumes that it can't be done. You know it can't be done, and then you ask anyway.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you think that's begging the question. Okay, that's not begging the question.
It's a fallacy. It's not. I don't care.
No, it's not. Look,
okay.
Well, begging the question is assuming your conclusion. I'm not assuming my conclusion.
This is a fallacy, though. I'm not saying it's begging the question. This is a fallacy. And
well, what fallacy is it then? I mean, what's the error? What logical error? What inferential
it fits
failure
under begging the question. It's a form of begging the question. But if you don't accept it as that, it is a logical fallacy, and I'll show you why. And I'll show you absolutely why it's a logical fallacy.
Okay. Well, okay. First of all, begging the question. There's two senses of begging the question. Okay. One is literally a logical fallacy, and the other one is not a logical fallacy. Okay. The sense in which begging the question is used to describe a logical fallacy is when you literally assume your conclusion as a premise. That is, you.
That's not what I'm accusing you of.
Okay, so you're not accusing me of a logical fallacy. Okay. Now the other sin of begging the question is not a logical fallacy. It is not an inferential failure. It's a rhetorical error only. Okay. And the other sense of begging the question is when, for instance, I ask you a question, or rather I answer a question. For instance, you ask me a question and I answer it, and I know that the answer that I give is immediately going to suggest a question that will come from you.
It's a loaded question. That's not what I'm talking about.
No, it's not a loaded question. No, a loaded question is the fallacy of the complex question. It's not.
No, not always. That's not true.
No, it's not always. It's not always.
Floyd, you know it's not always. You shouldn't even say that right now. The complex question fallacy is it's a subfacet. Begging the other one is a subfacet of the complex question fallacy. They're not the same.
Hang on. But I'm describing the two usages of the expression begging the question. One is the formal logical fallacy of assuming your conclusion.
I'm not accusing you of a rhetorical fallacy. I'm accusing you of the full Monty. You are.
Hang on a second. Hang on. Let me finish this though. The other sense of begging the question that people use is when you literally your answer beggars the question. The expression begging the question is a shorter form of or a corrupted form of the expression to beggar the question. That is, your answer beggars, immediately provokes a question, usually the same question or another question that you know the other person is going to ask. Okay, and that's just a rhetorical error. You should try to avoid beggaring a question and giving your answer. You should try to give an answer that you know that the other person isn't going to immediately go, oh yeah, of course, but and then ask the same question again or something like that. So I don't think this is a fallacy of begging the question. But what you're saying is that. What you're saying is that you can't provide a logical reductio. Okay, now here's why I think this is so important that you should provide a logical reductio. What you have argued, and what every presuppositionalist I've ever heard argue, is that the God of their religion, it doesn't matter if it's a Muslim God or a Christian God, it doesn't matter which flavor of presuppositionalist you're putting forth, a presuppositionalism you're putting forth. They always argue that one has to assume that their God exists because of the impossibility of the contrary. It's impossible that their God doesn't exist.
Yes, it's a soft reductio.
And okay, well, I don't see how that's a soft reductio. The only way you can establish the impossibility of a state of affairs, such as the impossibility that no God exists, the only way you can do that is if you can literally rule out every other possibility.
For some form of methodology.
And it's not through some form of methodology. All you have to do is derive a contradiction. There's no other way of establishing the absolute. But there's no way to establish the absolute.
I need a few minutes here. So here's the problem. Okay. What I've levied at you guys is that the impossibility of the contrary, actually proving that to be what you said, absolutely the impossibility of the contrary, to reduce it to, absolutely it's not if this premise is true, it reduces to the impossibility of the contrary. This is the impossibility of the contrary. Every impossibility of the contrary that is known to be true predicates on at least one premise that can be verified methodologically. Now, when I asked you for a counterexample, you said we do this in geometry all the time. Geometry can be evaluated methodologically using mathematics. Now, let me show you why this is absolutely the case. And it actually has to do with the example I gave you earlier. This is what's known as a logical reductio, and this is actually on the reductio ad absurdum example on the Wikipedia page. This is a true logical reductio. There is no smallest positive rational number because if there were, it could be divided by 2 to get to a smaller one. Now here's why this is a logical reductio. Okay, there is a smaller number. There is a smaller number than this one. It actually says in the Wikipedia page, the denial of the third would result in a logical contradiction, i.e., there is a smallest number, and yet there is one smaller than it. So we can actually prove this. Why we can prove this is a true logical reductio is due to mathematics. We can provide that there is a number smaller than this. So this is proven through a form of methodology, right?
This is, yes. Yeah, that
no, but
is.
all claims. Listen, I'm surprised you're not as very quick to hit on this. Every single true logical reductio has it that is not a soft reductio, but a complete true logical reductio. Not if the premise is true, but this is in fact true. It has to, by definition, have at least one premise that can be verified methodologically. You cannot.
How? We don't.
I just showed you.
We don't. Hang on. No, you didn't show this. Look. Every reductio uses logic. Okay, so what you're saying is what you mean by a methodology supposed to include even logic?
The only thing I figured out he's saying that the impossibility of a contrary is simply a presupposition that can, in his worldview, that cannot be evaluated.
Evaluated in your worldview.
So what he's saying is that his basic presupposition is his religion is correct, and that's it.
Oh, it just means that any transcendental claim could have.
But you're saying the impossibility of the contrary is simply a transcendental claim within your worldview.
No, that's not what I said. The beauty
but
of
you're
this
saying
argument,
you're saying we can't evaluate the impossibility of the contrary. That's what you're saying.
From my claim, it's impossible to evaluate. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And Ozzy already admitted that. That's not what's in question here. Floyd,
he admitted that?
Yes.
What did I admit exactly? I wonder if I could.
You admitted that no transcendental truth claim can be evaluated. That you cannot make a true reductio from a transcendental truth claim of God. It's
right.
impossible.
No, I didn't say that.
So Ozzy, what he's claiming now is that the belief that all other worldviews are impossible is one of his transcendental claims.
I could be wrong. Think about this. Even if my truth value of that statement is wrong, I'm still presenting to you a truth claim, right? And you are fallaciously evaluating it. So even if I'm wrong, the beauty of this argument...
fallaciously evaluating? First of all, how can evaluating be a fallacy? I mean,
you tried to say it was a rhetorical fallacy earlier, and I've told you...
No, that's not what I said. I said that the expression begging the question has two usages. One is denotes the
logical fallacy.
A formal logical deductive fallacy, and the other one is just a rhetorical error. It's just rhetorical imprudence, and I don't know which one you're accusing me of.
I'm accusing you of the full Monty. I'm accusing you of a logical fallacy. You are.
Okay, where is the logical? Where
Where
am I assuming my conclusion? I don't even know what conclusion you think it is I'm asserting.
No. It's not.
We're not even presenting a syllogism here.
I haven't presented
when you
claim
present
that I've assumed.
You made the assertion that other worldviews are impossible.
Right. How do you establish that they're impossible?
But then you say.
You can't ask me to establish that they're impossible. You can't do that. That begs the question.
Yes, I can. Listen. There's only one way. Listen. What does it mean for something to be impossible? Well, I mean, one of the clearest analyses of the concept of impossibility is that there is no possible world, no conceivable world, in which some state of affairs abides. To say that X is impossible is to say that X is not true at any possible world. Okay, so is it possible for me to have one more hair on my head? Yeah, well, there's a possible world. We can imagine a logically coherent world where Ozzy has one more hair on his head. Okay, and you can imagine a possible world where I'm missing an eye. Okay, there's nothing contradictory about saying Ozzy could, there could be an Ozzy with a missing eye. Now, as a matter of fact, in this world, Ozzy has both his eyes. Thank goodness. I'm happy to say I have both my eyes. Okay, but it's not sort of contradictory to assert that Ozzy has one eye, right? And the reason it's not contradictory to say that Ozzy has only one eye is because one can imagine that there could be a possible world where I have lost an eye or was born with only one eye or something like that. Okay, so to say that something is impossible is like, think about it, like when we say that something is a mere possibility, what we mean is that there's a possible world where X is the case, and there's a possible world where X is not the case, okay? And to say that something is necessary is to say that it's true in all possible worlds. And to say that something is impossible is to say that it's false. It is not the case in any possible world. So when you're saying that God exists and the contrary of that is impossible, what you're saying is that there's no possible, no logically conceivable world where God doesn't exist. Well, listen, I'm going to need to hear an argument for why God
Ozzy, you haven't
has
been
to exist
listening.
in every possible world.
You haven't been listening. The truth value of my claim could be 0. I could, in fact, be wrong, and you would still be rhetorical, as you claim, quote-unquote, rhetorically fallacious. But the problem is the value of my truth claim could be 0, and I could be absolutely wrong. But when I present you a truth claim, regardless if it's wrong or not, and then the form of methodology, or I know you hate that word, but you ask me to provide something on the outset that cannot be provided. So we need to agree on something before we go forward. And
Not that it cannot be provided, it's that you're not providing it. Look, for all I know, you could derive
that's
Q and not
agnosticism.
Q.
That's
No,
agnosticism.
it's not. No, listen,
oh
listen.
my God.
Listen, listen. Hang on. I don't see any reason why you couldn't, in principle, provide.
That's agnosticism.
Could I finish the sentence? I can't think of a reason why, in principle, you could not derive from the assumption there is no God some sort of contradiction, Q and not Q. I can't think of any reason why, in principle, that's impossible, right?
You avoid the fallacy by saying you're agnostic. That is.
How did I say I'm an agnostic? Nothing I've said implies agnosticism.
I don't say it's impossible that you could provide to me that something is Q and not Q. I don't deny that this is possible. I remain agnostic to this possibility. So you're saying, well,
that's not. Wait. That's not agnosticism with respect to the existence of God. That's agnosticism with respect to this particular.
That's how I'm
concept.
using it. That's how I'm using it in this forum. So, I know we're in the great debate community. Yes, we're in the great debate.
Oh, okay,
I'm talking about gnosis. I'm talking about you are agnostic. You have no gnosis. That's what I'm not saying it in the classical form. We're talking about something way more serious here than whether or not you believe in God.
That's fine then. I don't challenge that. That's fine. I withdraw the objection. If all you mean by agnostic in this sense is agnostic with respect to the question, then yes, of course.
That's why I got jumped out of my seat,
open. Well, that's why I'm completely. It's why I'm completely willing to hear the argument for the impossibility of the contrary. I am open to the possibility that you have a way of establishing some proposition and its negation, not establishing that they're true, just able to derive the proposition and its negation. You don't have to demonstrate that either one of them is true or false. You just have to be able to demonstrate that you can derive some conclusion and the negation of that conclusion under the assumption that God doesn't exist. And if you could do that, you would have performed a reductio. And
so
I can't see why you couldn't do that.
You're saying,
done that. And that would be a reductio.
You're saying, Shamos, I know that as it stands right now, that we know no way to prove a logical reductio from the God claim, but I remain agnostic to this fact. It is possible that this could be, even though we don't know it, but I'm going to stop from being fallacious by remaining agnostic to this fact. Now, this is interesting because I actually have an argument that defeats agnosticism, which actually goes along with this precept, and I'm going to use that now because I've whittled you down to a point where you have to claim agnosticism to avoid being fallacious. Now I'm going to show you.
Stop. You keep saying words like admit and concede and whittle me down. These are the points that I start with and insist upon from the outset, and you make them sound like they are concessions that I've given along the way. All right? I don't appreciate this dripping sarcasm. I've been absolutely fair-minded and open with you. I'm trying to hear your argument. I'm presenting the objections as I see them, okay? And you keep characterizing every argument that I actually start with and put forth as a concession that I've had to give, that it's ground that I'm yielding to you, okay? This is no way to argue, okay?
Think about this.
When I argue with people, I expect people to argue in accordance not just with the norms of rational discourse, but civil discourse, okay? So I'm just going to ask you to step off and just present the argument without characterizing my position in any way. Can you do that? Because you don't need me in the room to present your argument, and so you certainly don't need to characterize my position for me. You can simply state the argument.
Okay,
I don't need to exist at all.
I will do that, and I'll explain to you why I've gotten upset with this fact. Okay, when I say that we have agreed from the outset that we cannot provide a true logical reductio for the claim that I'm putting forth. Okay, but you're saying that you're saying that it's possible through agnosticism, right? But the reason why I'm so upset by this, and I've kind of lost it a little bit, is because you're basically saying that something that we know to be right now in this moment to be impossible, right? Could in fact be possible, but the problem is what I'm talking about actually is transcendental in the form that it doesn't have spatio matter, or it doesn't have mass. It can't be evaluated through. So you're actually using your agnosticism to postulate that there is a way that maybe in the future we could evaluate a non-substantive transcendental being. And that bothers me, and I did lose it. I'm sorry, but when someone...
We're not questioning the existence of your God. It has nothing to do with showing the impossibility of the contrary. We're asking you to evaluate our worldview. This has nothing to do with your worldview. You still don't understand that.
If I post you a truth claim, and let's say I post you just a normal truth claim, one that's not transcendental in nature. When I post you this truth claim and you want to evaluate this truth claim, most truth claims can be evaluated through some form of methodology. I am a male. If you pulled down my pants, you could confirm this truth statement that I posited to you. I've given you a truth statement, and this truth statement you're lucky enough that you can evaluate it through some form of methodological naturalism. It can be done, right? But actually, when I post to you a transcendental truth claim, it can't be evaluated at all. It doesn't matter if we're doing it from internally or from externally. This truth claim just cannot be evaluated through any form of methodology that you're used to saying.
And what's this truth claim? What's the truth claim you're making?
The truth claim I'm making is that the Christian God is the necessary preconditions for all existence. But due to the impossibility of the contrary. But here's the problem. Let's assume that I'm wrong.
So a possibility contrary is a transcendental claim that cannot be evaluated in any sense.
No, there's a lot of things that are impossible to be contrary, which can be proven through forms of methodology. Like I said, the oxygen atom. That right there can be proven methodologically, and nothing can.
But you're saying the impossibility of the contrary cannot be evaluated in any form, since you're declaring it transcendental.
The impossibility of the contrary is linked dynamically through a relationship with the law of non-contradiction in a very intimate way. Okay.
Right.
And the reason is because that's how it derives its power. For example, that oxygen molecule that I've posted to you is only that because it's definitionally. The moment that it becomes otherwise, it is no longer an oxygen molecule due to the laws of non-contradiction. Okay. So what I'm saying is when I posit to you this can be evaluated methodologically. It can, but when I posit to you my transcendental truth claim through the impossibility of the contrary, this one in particular cannot be. Some can, some can't, and this one can't be.
Hang on, Shamos. There's something I don't understand there. You're saying you're making a transcendental claim, and you're establishing the truth of this transcendental claim via the impossibility of the contrary, but there's no way in principle.
You misunderstood me.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Go ahead then.
My truth claim could be zero. All I'm doing is I'm positing to you a truth claim which you are forced to evaluate through some form of methodology. And the methodology of which I'm asking you to evaluate this truth claim is what I'm accusing you of being fallacious of. My truth claim, I'm not here to argue for the existence of God.
Are we allowed to use logic?
Listen, yes, I'm not here to argue the existence of the Christian God. This argument actually fits. A Muslim could pose to you the same argument. So the argument is not meant to establish whether my truth claim is in fact true. My truth claim, the value of my truth claim could in fact be zero, but due to the methodology that you use, depending on, you could still be fallacious even if I was wrong. That's the beauty of this argument. The truth claim is irrelevant.
But we're not evaluating whether or not your God exists or not.
I agree.
Right.
Right. What we're evaluating is your claim that God's non-existence is an impossibility. That's what we want to hear the argument for. Like, can you give a reason for thinking that God's non-existence is an impossibility?
You're implying that I can provide a logical reductio, and that's
no. I'm implying that if you're going to say that God's non-existence is an impossibility, that you're able to provide some justification to warrant that belief, because I don't know of one, but you're the one making the claim. But this is the burden of justification you have to bear.
Code word for methodology, which I've already established has to beg the question if you ask me that. And I know
well,
it's hard.
Wait a second. Like, you're the one making the claim, and what you're saying is, there's something egregious in my asking you to give a justification, a reason to warrant that claim having my attention. I mean,
it's not egregious. There's a problem here, though.
But you're taking umbrage at the fact that I'm saying, well, wait a minute, why should I take seriously this claim that God's non-existence is an impossibility? It seems perfectly coherent to me that God might not exist. In fact, that's what I believe. But even if I didn't believe it, even if I was a theist, right, I could still ask, Shamos, why do you think that God's non-existence is an impossibility? It has nothing to do with my atheism here, or if I was an agnostic. I mean, anybody any theist, your child could look at you and say, Daddy, why do you think God's non-existence is an impossibility? I know you think it's false because we're theists, Daddy, but why, Daddy, do you think God's non-existence is an impossibility? There must be a reason, Daddy, right? So it has nothing to do with theism or atheism. There's nothing wrong with asking you asking you to discharge the burden of your justification.
I agree. I'm not saying you cannot disagree with me. What I'm saying is the basis of which you disagree with me cannot be. The only way you can disagree with me. I'm not. No.
It has nothing to do with disagreement. Your child could agree with the claim that God exists. Your child could even agree that God exists necessarily. Your Christian child could look at you and say, Daddy, why do you believe God's non-existence is an impossibility? It has nothing to do with disagreeing with the proposition. It has to do with what is the reason for affirming the proposition.
I did use the wrong word there. You don't have to either disagree with it or agree with it, right? The value of truth that you place on it is also irrelevant to this. I'm only calling into question the methodology of which you are trying to get me to evaluate this through. And
what methodology is that?
Okay, first of all, if you're asking me to provide a logically soundness, or if you're...
No, it doesn't have to be sound. It has to at least be valid, though.
Or a logical reductio, or you want a true impossibility of the contrary, right? This is predicated on premises that can be verified in methodology, but none of mine can. So I accuse you when you ask me to provide a true reductio, a logical reductio, or a true showing of the impossibility of the contrary, you have to beg the question. So if you disagree out of that...
Which question am I begging? Which question am I begging?
You know I can't provide it for you? You ask me to provide it for you? I can't provide it for you.
No, I don't know that you can't provide it. You could surprise me by providing one. But you're not providing anything. You're not providing anything. It's not a shortcoming in my question that you can't provide a reason for thinking that God's non-existence is an impossibility. I don't see how that's a failure on my part or a shortcoming of my position. My position is irrelevant. My position could be your position, right? I could actually believe everything you believe and still ask, yeah, but Shamos, why do you believe God's non-existence is an impossibility? An impossibility. It's a big thing asserting that something is impossible.
Right. I understand that. And what I'm saying is, at any point when you want me to prove that it is absolutely impossible to the contrary, I'm not saying that it's wrong for you to ask me this, Ozzy. It's perfectly rational for you to ask me this. But what I'm saying is, it question begs because
it's not rational if I'm begging the question. It's by definition irrational if I'm begging the question.
Well, I agree. That's what I'm accusing you of. I'm trying to be.
What question am I begging? What premise am I assuming here? How is a question assuming anything?
Sure.
It's not loaded.
Well, this is what I'm accusing you of, and this is fallacious in its reason, right? And I'm going to run you through it. It's real short. I've said it a few times already. If I present to you the truth claim, okay, and the method of which you are saying that in order for this truth claim to be sound is either you need to A, prove in fact it is the impossibility of the contrary, or B, you need to actually produce a logical reductio, okay? But but you know ahead of time, before you've asked this, that I cannot provide this.
I don't know that. Your
Listen,
child could ask you the question.
In agnosticism, though, I was about to answer that stipulation. You know ahead of time that this cannot be done, but you say, well, maybe it's possible.
If you make a truth claim, we'll ask for a syllogism. We're not asking for any reductio or whatever. We're just asking for any syllogism at all.
Yeah, I think only a reductio will do it, but never mind that. I mean, give me something. But the difficulty here, Shamos, is you're assuming that that I'm insisting on some kind of procedure. I'm not insisting on any kind of procedure.
Yes, you are.
But what procedure am I insisting on?
Okay, here's the two procedures you're insisting on. You're either saying, I need to produce, this is Floyd's one that he's asking specifically multiple times. Floyd's saying, I am asking you to actually show that this is, the contrary is in fact impossible, okay? And then that would make my claim become logically valid and sound. You were saying, on the other hand, which you would agree with that as well, but you're also saying, if you can provide to me a true logical reductio, or at least some form of logical equivocation or backing that gives this some merit, then I'm going to be willing to. But here's the problem: it can't happen. I can't provide to you any of this stuff. And
well, then you're giving me your claim has no warrant on anybody's attention.
You're admitting defeat right there. You just admitted defeat.
Why does this claim warrant any attention from you? I don't understand this.
So you want to be agnostic now?
No, I want to know why you believe this proposition is true, that God's non-existence is an impossibility. I'd like to hear a reason why you think it's true. I presume it's not a mere presupposition. I thought that you said you had an argument.
No, yeah. I don't want to go into this because it's off the subject and it taints things.
I've been bringing that up over and over again. It sounds like the impossibility of the contrary is one of his presuppositions.
Yes.
So therefore, there it is. There it is.
Oh, okay.
There it is.
Fine, but if that's your presupposition, Shamos, look, if your presupposition is that God exists, and your presupposition is that the impossibility, it's impossible for God not to exist, then
that's what all Christians think, Floyd. I mean, Ozzy, let's be real here. That's what all Christians think. Every single one.
I don't think that's true. I know some Christians who reject presuppositionalism.
No.
Strenuously.
That's not what I'm saying. All Christians believe God is a necessary precondition for existence due to the impossibility of the contrary.
No. Not all Christians believe that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, let's grant for the sake of argument that every Christian. I mean, we can get into the no to Christian business here. Let's sidestep that. Let's just grant that arguendo. I'll just grant you that. Even within the scope of that assumption, it seems to me that you have a problem here. I thought you were trying to present an argument for the impossibility of the contrary. That is, you were going to try to argue that God's impossibility was a rational belief, and now you're telling me that it's a presupposition.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying it cannot be proven.
You did say it was a presupposition.
Oh, no. You're flip-flopping back and forth. This is getting ridiculous.
I've received revelation, and due to this revelation, I presuppose the Christian God. I'm not bull-crapping you guys. I'm not lying. Okay? I'll admit it. It's been admitted. There you go. I'm not. Believe me, in Art and Sokka have heard me say that about 1,000,000 times. I have never once denied that ever to anyone.
Okay, no, but I thought the purpose of this hangout was that you were going to do this. I'm not trying to be dismissive.
It would be super interesting.
I genuinely thought that's what you were going to do here.
Yeah, it would be super interesting.
Which is why I was insisting that you produce some kind of reductio, because
right.
When one says that something is an impossibility, really nothing short of a reductio of some form is going to do it. So
that begs the question, though.
Well, how does it? What you keep saying it begs the question. How
you came here?
Anybody with any worldview could ask you that question.
I agree. Any transcendental, a Muslim could post it. It would be just as logically valid as what I posted you tonight.
Your twin brother, who thinks exactly like you, could ask you the same question, right? So in other words, it can't be that there's some fallacy of assuming the wrong thing, right? A person who shares every one of your beliefs could still say, I want to know of you, Shamos, why do you believe it? I know why I believe it. I want to know of you why you believe it. Okay.
I mean, he's performing an external critique on other worldviews, and we asked him to do an internal critique. He said, "Well, no, I have to go back to my presupposition of that it's impossible." He's begging the question.
No, what I'm saying is we're both begging the question, and I've already.
How are we begging the question?
Okay, Ozzy, forgive me for what I'm about to say.
Begging the question for wanting to use logic.
Ozzy attempted, or not attempted, I gotta stop using. Ozzy has tried to, forgive me for this, Ozzy has tried to get out of that by saying it's not a logical fallacy, it's just a rhetorical one. It's not even a fallacy, it's just rhetorically...
No, I didn't say that. When I was describing that, I was explaining that there are two ways of understanding the expression begging the question or begging the question. I was simply itemizing the two ways that expression is used for the purposes of people, for the sake of people who are watching who might be unfamiliar with the usage of that expression. Okay, I don't know which of those you were accusing me of. I suspected that you were accusing me of literally assuming my conclusion, right? Which you said was I think you said that it was the full Monty, or the full, which is by which you meant that I was in fact assuming my conclusion. I don't know what conclusion you think I'm assuming.
Okay,
earlier
you tried to kind of disguise or cloak the fallaciousness within agnosticism, but here's what I'm accusing you of being. This is the actual fallacy I'm accusing you of. I'm accusing you of, first of all, earlier I at least thought we had come to an agreement that the transcendental God claim I'm posting to you, I can never provide to you a true logical reductio. And I think that at least me and Ozzy were able to kind of come to that middle ground, or not middle ground, but just say, yes, this is true. But Ozzy has said, well, I'm
I
saying,
don't remember saying that.
You were saying you were agnostic to the fact that it could be proven.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
but what
open
that
to the
does
possibility.
is, yeah, the agnosticism is what prevents you from the fallaciousness of what I'm accusing you of. Right?
You're characterizing open-mindedness and to your argument, to your position, a willingness, a receptiveness to hear the argument. You're characterizing this as agnosticism, which I think it's fair to say. Yes, I am agnostic on this.
Yes.
But you say cloak and disguise and stuff like that, as if saying, listen, I don't know. I'm willing to hear the argument.
Think about this.
Somehow some kind of rhetorical trickery.
If I told a scientist, or I'm not just going to use a scientist, someone that presupposes metaphysical naturalism to provide a defeater here, but I'm saying if we colloquially asked a lot of educated people on this subject, is it possible to provide evidence in the means of this, some form of can methodological naturalism evaluate the Christian truth claim? And most people would say no, it cannot.
Yeah, well, it could, depending on how
God decided to come down to New York City and somehow you
can
test it.
No. I mean,
yeah,
there are other ways. I mean, there are historical claims. I mean, God, the Christian God is not like the God of deism or pantheism or something like that.
The flood. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the Christian God is a God that intervenes, right? He appears in front of people in the form of whirlwinds or other forms. He turns sticks into snakes. He parts the Red Sea. He lets people win battles in international conflicts. He takes on he incarnates and then performs miracle as signs. He empowers other people, the followers, to do these things. Right? I mean, this is a God that does intervene. And so if we find out that those stories are not true, then I think Christianity, as described there, stands falsified. Okay, but you can also say, well, no, we can bracket all of that. I'm talking about God Himself. What direct evidence could you have of God? Not indirect evidence empirically. And if you're talking about a completely transcendental God, well, then yeah, okay. Then I'll say, yeah, it doesn't make sense if you're speaking about a God that is purely transcendental and non-interventionist in history. Then, of course, it is wrong to say, show me the empirical evidence, because you're not positing an empirical entity or an entity that even has empirical implications. And if there are no empirical implications of the entity you're positing, it makes no sense to require empirical implications and empirical evidence. Right?
Well, all that really does is say, well, this agnosticism is valid because your God very well could just appear to me right now during this conversation, and then He could prove to me what you're saying is actually true. And I agree with you. Well, think about it. If you're saying that, well, I'm agnostic to the fact that the transcendental, you're not agnostic. I mean, hold on, let me get this straight. You're saying that since the Christian God is a personal being, it is actually possible to verify some of these things methodologically. right, through methodological naturalism. You're saying since your God is a personal God, he actually could methodologically verify it at any time he wants, not even in the past, but he could literally drop down to me right now and methodologically verify. Like, for example, if the roof of your house opened up and all the stars shifted together and said, I am Yahweh, like you were saying the other day. So
Right.
you're saying, I'm agnostic to the fact because, Shamos, I know that by definition your God could do these things. So my agnosticism is warranted, right?
Yes, yeah. Well,
Okay.
I would,
Well,
I would
here's
say,
the
in fact, that
problem.
my atheism is warranted. I would go so far as to say my atheism
Right.
is warranted with
Here's the
respect to
problem.
your God.
Good. I'm glad we got that far. Here's the problem. You said earlier that it indeed would be a fallacy if my God was absolutely transcendental, if I was not agnostic to that fact. Okay, so now that we've gotten this far, what I'm going to do is we've kind of come to the fact that, well, if your God was fully transcendental, okay, fully, which he isn't, okay, it would in fact be a fallacy for me to ask for methodological proof, okay? So, but what I want to get now is, since in the form that you can kind of avoid the fallaciousness is to just say, well, I'm warranted in my agnosticism, right? And I agree, your agnosticism is warranted. So from here, I would like to go on to attack agnosticism. And I have a couple arguments that you've already heard in where logically I can attack I can induce what I think is a contradiction into your agnosticism, which means if your agnostic view contradicts my view, you can't contradict my view and then remain agnostic to it. Would you agree? If I could show you...
Yes, I would, except that no agnostic contradicts your view. I mean, an
Okay,
agnostic,
then I'm
by
going to present
definition,
the argument.
doesn't contradict your view. What's that?
Sure. Then I'll present the argument then. So you're saying, well, if in fact I did contradict your view and was agnostic, this would be about this. That in fact I could not do that and still be agnostic, and I agree. You cannot be agnostic and contradict my view. So here's the argument. Okay. So the argument basically says that let me see. There's two different ones. The one I'm going to start with is okay. The necessary precondition for all existence. Okay. So Christians claim that God is the necessary precondition for all existence due to the impossibility of the contrary. Okay, you, in order to remain agnostic to this fact, to the fact that what I'm putting forth to you is that literally the Christian God is nothing could be possible without him due to the impossibility of the contrary. Okay, if when I posit this to you, let me see how I want to word this. When I posit this to you due to the possibility of the contrary, in order for you to remain agnostic to this, you have to say it's both possible that this is true and both possible that this might not be true. That's what agnosticism is saying. So you're saying my claim of the impossibility of the contrary is both possible and possibly not possible.
Wait, yeah, but hang on.
I'm not limiting to you. I know limiting to you to one of these would be fallacious, right? You're saying, no, I'm even remaining agnostic here, but I haven't fully levied my criticism of your agnosticism yet. What I'm trying to say is, if I have a stipulation due to the impossibility of the contrary, and you think that the possibility of the contrary is in fact possible, you are contradicting my worldview, or not my worldview, but my truth claim through your agnosticism. Which
are you saying God? Wait, are you saying God is the non-existence of God is logically impossible or metaphysically impossible? I thought you were saying
metaphysically impossible.
Okay, but then there's an equivocation in your argument, because when an agnostic says, well, possibly God exists necessarily, but possibly not, he's saying it is logically possible. I can coherently and internally consistently conceive of both of those possibilities, right? Even though one of them metaphysically has to be true, they can't both be true, though, right? So an agnostic is saying it is logically possible that God is metaphysically necessary, but it's also logically possible that God is not metaphysically necessary.
That's where you contradict my position due to the impossibility of the contrary. For example, if my position wasn't stipulated that the contrary was impossible, you see, you contradict that when you say that the contrary is in fact possible. Not
No,
saying that it
logically
is
possible, not metaphysically
yes,
possible.
yes, logically possible. But even so, you're still saying that. Okay, so I know what you're saying. You're saying that no, I'm conceding that it could be metaphysically absolutely correct, but we're just talking about logical possibilities of this. But we're not talking about the metaphysical possible. It's very, very probable that metaphysically you're right, that God is the only. But we're just speaking in forms of logic. But
Well, by metaphysical, I mean metaphysically necessary, not metaphysically true, right? I mean,
right.
presumably, if God's metaphysically necessary, of course, it's metaphysically true. But you're saying that it's metaphysically necessary, and the agnostic could say, yeah, maybe God is metaphysically necessary.
And maybe he's not metaphysically.
And maybe he's not metaphysically necessary. I don't know which it is. It is not a contradiction to say A or not A. It's a contradiction to say A and not A.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
The agnostic is putting forward the principle of the excluded middle. He's not asserting a contradiction. He's not violating the principle of non-contradiction here. He's saying A or not A. He's not saying A and not A.
This is where the beauty of the argument comes in, because it actually starts to get really circular here, and we're literally almost done. We've almost done full circle. So let's say that presuppose that I'm actually right, that literally the Christian God is the necessary precondition, and I am absolutely right. If that was in fact true, this is a thought experiment, if that is in fact true, it would be logically, you would be committing the fallacy of a logical reductio by saying that it is in fact.
No, I would be mistaken. It wouldn't be a contradiction. It would be a mistake. I would have a false belief. I wouldn't be believing P and not P. I would just have a false belief. I would believe P and not P.
You would be wrong. It would be logically wrong, and it would to assume
it would be factually wrong. But at no point is the agnostic asserting P and not P.
Right, but what I'm saying is to you, if I could prove to you that what I'm saying is right, then you would be logically incorrect to
assume. If you could prove to me that it was the case, and then I still asserted it, then yes, of course, then I would be rationally inconsistent.
Beautiful.
I would, in fact, yes, if you could do that, right.
But now this is where the beauty of the argument comes in. We're going to roll it back, and we're like 2 minutes from being done. Okay. Now, I can't prove it to you. You know that. And then to ask me to prove
I don't know that you can't do that. It remains to be seen whether or not you can do it.
Okay. So that's fine. I think it's. I've already shown you why the agnostic position cannot be truly agnostic in my position. I'm not going to re-harp on it. I'm not going to try to beat it into your head. But that is the full entire conclusion of everything I've said. I've tried to provide an argument why you cannot be agnostic. I've tried to provide an argument if it was in fact a logical reductio that you would be logically wrong, and you would be fallacious to assert otherwise.
Do you understand the difference? Wait, hang on, Shamos. Do you understand the difference between being mistaken, believing P when not P is the case, or vice versa, versus believing a contradiction, that is, believing both P and not P? Do you understand the difference between having a false belief and having a self-contradictory belief?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Okay. So I don't mean that sarcastically. I sincerely mean this, because what you're suggesting is, what you said is, if I could prove to you that, okay, yes, if you could prove to me that that God was metaphysically necessary and or logically necessary, if you actually could establish that for me, then of course anybody who is an agnostic who said, well, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, would be rationally incontinent, and you could laugh it off. Okay,
right.
But until you have done that, the agnostic is perfectly legitimately able to say, well, not necessarily warranted. I mean, even agnosticism has a burden of justification, but the agnostic is perfectly at liberty, on pain of no contradiction, to say, maybe God is metaphysically necessary, and maybe He's not metaphysically necessary. I don't know which it is. I don't have a reason to believe one over the other, right? And that. I
think your mic cut out, Ozzy.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. I think it was just a lag. Go ahead.
So the agnostic is merely asserting A or not A. He's not asserting A and not A. The latter would be a contradiction. The former is not a contradiction. Now, where the contradiction enters into it is that he is not affirming what you affirm. Okay, but he's not denying what you affirm. But what you're doing is you're construing his refusal to affirm what his refusal to affirm what you affirm contradicts your view. So it contradicts your view. Yeah, agnosticism, right, is not your view. It's incompatible with your view. Okay?
Due to the impossibility of the contrary. And by even thinking the possible is possible, you have contradicted my view. That's what I've been. Like I said, I've already given you the argumentation for it. I don't want to get repetitive or beat it into your head or, you know. But
wait, say that last bit again about the. Where was the contradiction again? Please say that again. Wait. Oh, darn. I've forgotten the wording that you used. The last thing you said there before I don't want to beat it into your head was.
No, I'm saying I don't want to beat it into your head. I've tried to prove to you or show to you that my transcendental claim cannot reduce to a logical reductio. I cannot prove the impossibility of the contrary. To ask me to do so seemingly begs the question, if you remain agnostic to my claim, to my truth claim, which is a way of avoiding fallaciousness, then I've already offered argumentation to show you why, in fact, agnosticism versus my claim of the impossibility of the contrary actually contradicts my position by thinking the contrary is, in fact, possible.
Can you explain what proposition I am assuming? You keep saying that I'm begging the question, and you mean it in the strict logical sense of assuming my conclusion. What conclusion am I assuming?
Right. So
in the question.
You want me to pose it in form of a question?
No. The question: how do you? What warrant or reason do you have to offer for thinking that God's non-existence is an impossibility? That's a question. How is that a loaded question? What assumption do you think is packed in there that's illicit, that denies?
It's not that form of begging the question. That's the classical form. It's okay. I'm going to explain to you without actually. This is what I'm accusing you of. Okay, if I present to you, I've said this a few times. I'm getting really repetitive. If I pose you a transcendental claim, okay, and then the two methods which I've heard from both you and Floyd that you will accept, not through methodology. It's not necessarily methodological, but it is in a sense, and I'll explain why. You said if you can provide me a true logical reductio, this would give your position some credence, right? This would actually make it so that you are not just merely asserting. This would lend credence to what you're doing. And Floyd has said pretty much the same thing. If you can show that the impossibility of the contrary is in fact impossible, this would lend credence to what you're saying. But I've already asserted that I can't show these things due to the transcendental nature of my argument. So in order for you to ask me to provide something from the outset that you know I cannot provide.
I don't know that you can't provide it.
It's only because of your agnosticism. And I've already said it's going to get repetitive, and that's why we need to stop soon, because you claimed agnosticism, and then I've shown you what I think is a defeater, which shows that your agnosticism actually contradicts my position, which means you truly can't be agnostic.
No agnosticism ever contradicts a proposition.
Yes, a proposition due to the impossibility of the contrary metaphysically, you in fact do. Not all.
Listen, supposing I say X is necessarily true, and a person says, oh, really? Well, maybe X is necessarily true, maybe not. What's your reason for thinking X is necessarily true? How is that propositional attitude, that attitude towards your proposition, how is that begging the question?
Okay.
It would be begging the question if I mean, your idea of begging the question seems to consist of asking the question.
Fallacious reasoning. That's what I'm accusing you.
Okay, well, what's the fallacy? What?
Okay, it doesn't have to have a name.
No, but just specify the fallacy. Show the fallacy. What inference rule am I violating? Just do that.
From the outset, you are asking for a form of confirmation that from the outset you know cannot be provided. So therefore,
that's precisely what I don't know. You keep saying that, and I keep saying no.
You cloak it in agnosticism, right? And you're cloaking in a form of agnosticism that, okay, for 2,000 years.
How is it cloaking it? I mean,
I'll show you why. I mean, 2,000 years since the death of Jesus, no one has ever been able to methodologically prove God. We just haven't been able to do this, or else we would all be Christians, or whatever you would say. So since this has never been doing, the way you get out of this actual transcendentalness of my argument is to say, well, your God is personal. It is very possible, even though in 2,000 years since the death of Jesus this has never happened. I'm not ruling it out as a possibility, and that's fine. I told you that's logically reasonable of you. I've accepted that of you. And I said, now what I'm going to do, Ozzy, is I'm going to move on to challenge your agnosticism and show that your agnosticism contradicts the notion that I'm putting forth, and therefore, by definition, cannot remain truly agnostic. And that's the form of the argument. I mean, that's the whole, and it cycles. And as soon as we get to that point, then it's back to, I need to provide some type of methodological proof, and then it loops again. So, I mean,
okay, you said that I'm begging the question against you. Your quote transcendental argument. I haven't heard the transcendental argument. I've heard a transcendental claim. I haven't heard a transcendental argument yet.
Yes,
I think I
you've
know
heard of
what
the
you're saying.
reductio. I've provided you a transcendental claim that boils down to a soft reductio. You want a transcendental.
How is a soft reductio? Like,
Shamos,
I
can show you.
I'm going to reword your argument and tell me if I'm right. Your God is logically necessary, therefore the contrary is impossible. Wouldn't that be more correct?
No, I like premise one. The Christian God is the necessary precondition for all of existence due to the impossibility of the contrary.
Okay, yeah, so you're saying the impossible is the contrary is impossible first, therefore your God's necessary. Right, it sounds like you're arguing that since your God is necessary, therefore everything else is impossible. See, that's where I think the confusion's taking place.
There's a couple syllogisms I could use here based off of that. That's P1. So the syllogism I would use to attack your agnosticism would be P2. Ozymandias Ramses II claims to be agnostic regarding P1. Okay, so that would be P2. Okay, P3 would be Ozymandias Ramses II through his agnosticism contradicts my position. Therefore, you know
what a contradiction is? It means to deny the proposition.
Ozzy, I do know what a contradiction is.
Right, but an agnostic is saying, I don't know that it's true. I don't know that I believe it. I can't believe. I can neither affirm the proposition nor deny the proposition.
I agree. P3 has a subset of ABC, and the ABC is the argument I've given to show that you truly cannot be agnostic without contradicting my position. And then here's the conclusion: is therefore Ozymandias Ramses II cannot truly be agnostic regarding my position. That's only the syllogism for me levying an attack at your agnosticism.
Where do you ever argue that the agnostic is contradicting your proposition? Contradicting it. Literally denying it, that is literally asserting the opposite.
I've already, Ozzy, I've said it multiple times. Okay, so
what's the argument, though?
This is the argument. The Christian God is the necessary precondition for all of existence due to the impossibility of the contrary. Ozymandias holds that it is both possibly possible and possibly not possible. Due to the impossibility of the contrary.
No, wait, hang on a second.
That was the argument.
Yeah, but you're construing the agnostic's position, which is not my position, of course, but you're construing the agnostic's position as if the person is asserting both to be true, which of course would be a contradiction. But the person is asserting neither. That's what an agnostic is. It's a person who asserts neither and denies neither.
He's saying that okay, if you say that, you know about modal logic. If you say that the possibility is true, that means it in fact has to be possible in at least one other possible world. What I'm saying is the impossibility of the contrary means that cannot be even possible in one possible world. So it precludes that.
And that needs an argument.
It precludes that, and no, it doesn't, because it can't. And then we just did the loop again.
Right. But it seems to me now that what you're saying is you have a transcendental argument, but then when push comes to shove, what you say is there isn't an argument. There can't be an argument because it's transcendental. You think that because you put the word transcendental in front of a claim, and an argument that somehow
truly
extricates you from
believe.
having to justify your or satisfy a justificatory burden. I don't see how you get around that.
No. I just know that my claim and that cannot be proven through methodological naturalism in lieu of what currently we know. It never has been proven.
What does methodological naturalism or any form of naturalism have to do with this? I mean, nobody here but you has mentioned methodological naturalism. I certainly haven't said demonstrate to me that some material means that God exists or that God is an impossibility. I would never ask that.
I know you wouldn't. That's why you have asked for the impossibility of the contrary to be proven or a logical reductio.
No, hang on. Look, you are saying that you know God exists because of the impossibility of the contrary. The impossibility of the contrary is the reason that you get. You even said earlier when you were reading premises, due to the impossibility of the contrary. In other words, your belief in the existence of God rests on the impossibility of the contrary.
That's not true.
Well, that's what you said. You said
my belief in God rests on revelation, and I know you're going to laugh at that. Probably,
I'm recalling. No, I don't laugh at that.
Okay, well, look. Here's how I get my precepts.
Wait, hang on a second. Wait, hang on. You need to reformulate your argument though earlier, because when you were reading premises earlier, you literally said due to the impossibility of the contrary. Because due to means because of. By reason of, by virtue of, okay?
So I agree with that. What I'm saying is that is not the basis for why I believe in God, due to the impossibility. I believe in God.
You should recast that.
No. I still hold to it. No, I still hold to it.
You mean and, not. You don't mean due to. You mean and.
No, due to the. I still hold to that, Ozzy. Listen, what I'm trying to tell you. Okay. I don't believe in. You gotta let me finish. I do not believe in the Christian God due to the impossibility of the contrary. I believe in the Christian God because of revelation, and because of revelation, I know that the contrary is impossible. That's my basis for forming the argument of the contrary impossible. It's based on revelation that I know to be true, and I know this isn't even worth talking about because I'm trying to talk about philosophy. I'm not trying to talk about why my internal justifications and whether or not these are true and whether or not you could call them into question. There's no way to evaluate these either methodologically. I mean, even logically, there's no way to evaluate this, so we should just leave that out. So, well, I don't really know where to go from here. I think we're pretty much...
Yeah, no, I think we're at an impasse. You think that you have sort of a nice, internally consistent argument that works in a circle that scotches every objection.
Yes, that's exactly what
I think. And I think that absolutely none of that, no part in that argument meets the objections, so we'd sort of have to have arguments about each point along the way, which I guess we could do. But
would you be willing, now that we're pretty much wrapped up, would you be willing to consent to have this published live? Would that be cool with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't care. Yeah, I have no objection at all. The reason I always recommend that we do hangouts off air is I find that the arguments tend to be more civil and more productive and stuff like that. But I would only ask, just put the whole thing up, no pieces and parts, and no talk putting up, just in the interests of integrity and honesty.
Right.
Put the whole thing
Xbox and them are going to put it up. I'm not going to touch it at all. They're just going to load it.
No, but you might mirror it or something like that, and
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I appreciate it, and you're right. I do think that I have an argument that's logically consistent. I think that it's circular in the fact where it kind of cuts off all possible advances, and I know that you're not going to assent to that, but through the form that you can't evaluate my claims methodologically, and we can only evaluate them through logical or philosophical methods, and even these logical or philosophical methods, we can't evaluate them through a soundness, because even the soundness cannot be proven, or at least that's what I'm claiming. I know you remain agnostic to that, but I think that really is the hinge point of the... I appreciate you listening to me, and I know that I could only imagine how annoying I probably sound to some of you guys that don't believe this stuff,
Yeah, well, just to be clear, I don't find it annoying. There was one point where I scolded you a bit, and I'm sorry if that was a little harsh. When I did that, I didn't think this would be going on air, so I would never have done that.
No, it's okay.
If
I
I'd known it was
lost it a
going
little
on
bit.
there. No, that's okay. I mean, I mean, you're always very cool in these things. I've never really seen you lose it. So, you know, I was being a little testy there with you myself. So I apologize for that. Had I known that was going to go on air, I wouldn't have done that because I don't like to sort of embarrass people or be embarrassed myself. So I hope you won't take that to heart.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. Anyway, but I enjoyed this discussion. I thought it was actually quite interesting. I'll let you have the last word if you like.
I think I baited you into coming here by thinking that maybe I was going to actually provide an argument for an actual reductio or for an actual impossible to the contrary, because that would have been an interesting talk. Like, if I could truly present you an argument for the impossible to the contrary that is valid in the form that you would accept, or even close to it, that would be very interesting. Like, that would be a great discussion to have if I could prove to you a truly impossible to the contrary, or logically leading to that end, or a true logical reductio. And I don't mean to. I hope that I didn't bait you here because of that, because I just really truly don't think I can do that, and that's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, I'll confess then that if that was the bait, I took the bait. I really did expect you to present an argument that would be some kind of reductio argument, because I don't think anything short of some form of reductio ad absurdum argument is ever going to establish the impossibility of some possible state of affairs.
Publish that article. Stanford would be calling me up asking me to teach philosophy probably more.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Okay,
And maybe,
well,
hey, maybe it can be done. You know, God willing. I'm always somebody, maybe, but that person is not me.
okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for hashing this out. Unless anybody else has anything else to add into this, I'm going to take it off air now.
Thanks very much.